Co naciś mu ze mną? Paraj wokół, dziewczą. Hysterical woman.
Is every woman with an opinion hysterical to you?
Good evening. Today we have gathered to hold a discussion on the topic of the image of the world through the prism of war. And we have participants from Ukraine, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. So the Ukraine is represented by Irina Perikalchuk, Keta Van Korzak represents Georgia, and Azerbaijan is represented by Sabina Sheklinskaya. And I myself will be the moderator of the discussion today. My name is Elchin Aliyev. I would suggest some kind of a preliminary understanding to build some context of what we are going to talk about, a kind of preface related to the relationship between war and peace. And in this sense, it seems to me that we need to start with a bit of history, from the profound history, and the most famous Heraclitus phrase that sounds something like this: you should know that war is a generally accepted, that enmity is the usual order of things, and that everything arises through enmity and is mutually accepted. And he adds that the war, the father of all, the king of all. This is kind of a philosophical postulate of Heraclitus, who puts the war at the forefront and the basis of everything. There is another expression that was made by the military Karl von Clausewitz, that war is a continuation of politics just by other means. And in this sense, it is a very interesting and ironic, I would say, phrase the Michel Foucault has mentioned. Something like this, started on the contrary, and says that the statement turns out to be, in his interpretation, that the politics is the continuation of war just by other means. Both Heraclitus and Foucault put the war at the forefront of everything and as a base of everything. Hannah Arendt was saying that globalization has turned out from a Cold War into such a general civil war, if you like, and that is all, statements that, in its turn, as far as I understand, for artists, are not a decree in a way that they are not required to do that. It's good that the creative people have their own understanding of the idea and experience of what is war, what is peace, and how they both correlate and intertwine with each other. I would suggest that we go directly to the discussion, and in that context, I would like to probably start with the obviously opinions of our participants. Coming back to Irina, I would like to first of all, somewhat take into the account that our participants coming from Ukraine, and as Ukraine, as an example, for us today, the example today, yesterday, and before yesterday, well, we know that there is a conflict and the both sides are the same. They are not different. They are both ethnic Slavs, and there's no difference either in the confessional or religious affiliation. Most of them are Orthodox. But in matters of cultures, there is a big question that already arises, because the word culture, what do we associate the word culture with? It's associated with something peaceful, something good, and so on and so forth. But it turns out that cultural contradictions between individual, particular groups of the population or peoples and so on today cause an effect of confrontation, which in fact in the Middle Age and in the ancient world was similar to intensity to a war between either religions or confessions within one single religion. And in this sense, because, well, culture includes, and in addition to obviously art and so on, above all, it includes a way of life. And when we speak about the peace, we must say that there is culture, there is also the local distribution in some kind of geography, and there may be some discrepancies. And in this sense, culture, by the way, here we have also talked a little bit about gender components, that if, let's say, the war is a man and the peace is a woman, a house is a woman, I believe that culture is also a woman. And in this context, the cultural codes and so on and so forth can come into a kind of a conflict with neighboring, adjacent cultures, with some other culture. And there are generally egregious examples of when, well, if you remember Coppola's film Apocalypse Today, when it means that, well, both politically and in fact, based on the meaning, they was explaining that why America wants to fight in Vietnam. There was the main thesis that the Vietnam is encroaching on the American way of life. It wasn't about geopolitics or oil or other things. In that sense, what your artists feel, what they are going through, please. Well, such a long and complex introduction, really, and I probably rightly noted that the situation that has now developed in Ukraine and this military conflict with Russia, or Russia that occupied part of the Ukrainian land in many respects, is surprising, because in our cultures it is customary to position the neighborhood of our country as a friendly neighborhood, as a brotherhood. And if we are talking about the gender aspects, we can call it sisterhood. So in that sense, it seems to me that the Ukrainian artists, well, in our practice, and I'm probably talking not only about Ukrainian artists per se, but in general about the cultural workers, about representatives of very different creative communities. As Sabina was saying, that when we say artist, we mean actually several things. We mean musician, artist, director, journalist, architect, and so on. But now, in the context of these military events that we are facing, we talk a lot about what we are and how we are, how different we are, and trying to fend off ourselves and our cultural traditions from each other in a way, despite the fact that there are, let's say, some kind of templates already established and attempts to unite us and I don't know, any kind of to build us as one nation. And it seems to me also that if we are talking about some project and reflections of artists on the topic of the war, and in particular the Russian-Ukrainian war, then they are probably more of some kind of perhaps social component, and about how a person as a human being, as a personality, as such a cultural unit, if you like, can position himself in such a difficult time of turbulence. And again, we can also speak about different artists. Well, because there are artists that adhere to the left-wing artists who work like this, but they do it differently and do it in the same method. But there are others right-wing that who are seeming to need to be more radical in just the way they speak about more about politics, for example, about rather kind of personal experiences associated with the war. Thank you. Well, so to speak, in just to continuation of your statement, this division between left, right, internationalists and nationalists, those who are adherent of the European cultural code and those who are affiliating themselves with the Eurasian. And this division, by the way, exists in all countries. There's no way to say that you understand like everything is national and here country is going after another country. In fact, this division, and as I see it, is more subtle and more complex, and it is right. I mean that I think this division can even go within a particular selected family where there's no consensus within that family, and in this sense, yes, the artist in some of his own specific ways trying to convey some fundamental things, and here it is important that he wasn't some kind of ideology or herald of some kind of political cliches and some kind of attitudes. In this sense, you have artists whom you could, let's say, single out as a pure psychology, as if rebuffed from those social cliches. There is probably, but if you allow me, I would need probably some time to think it through, and maybe some of my colleagues could comment on this. Yes, thank you. Ketevan, may I? Yes, I would like to just join in right away. I had the answer immediately. And we all would probably agree that war is the greatest evil of humanity. And yes, I think that it is probably wrong to divide the artists according to some national features or idiosyncrasies. I assure you that in Russia there are also such artists and creators who do not accept, let's say, this war, and they have a creative way of protesting that, and they show it indeed and display it in their works. For example, I do remember that when we had this war in Abkhazia as it started, there was a group, a part of a Russian artist. They ordered and put on the t-shirts. There were t-shirts on which was written, "I was Georgian." And this is the way they did it. They walked so demonstratively. They supported Georgia by this act. And I hope that there are such artists that exist. And let's agree on that a good artist is not, well, I mean, nationality does not define whether you are a good artist or not. It's a separate nation of artists who equally and adequately respond to all sorts of moments. Say, well, where's Vietnam or Iraq? We are all our people in the end, right? We live in some other human kind of moments. We live with it, and we have love, we have something, I don't know what kind of feeling it could be associated with. It doesn't even depend on the skill, on the mastery of the artist. It's just a human attitude, and I think that they are ordinary people who usually and normally react and adequately react to any military action and any catastrophe. And we know that the war is a catastrophe because people are dying. We all live under one sky, I think, and at least I hope so it is like that. But I would like to talk about gender component of some projects, and we specifically touched upon that. And in this sense, the practice, this artistic practice, is, I think, something inquisitive. The fact that when we say children, we assume that there is a mother who brings them up, right? Because the mother actually is in contact with the child for more time than the father. And In Afghanistan, there are already quite steadily areas where instantly, there are tanks, cannons, and so on, there are military equipment and so on. So a child who has been living in this environment from childhood and infancy and, examines these frames, he has a certain feeling of his rather inner consciousness with these military objects, isn't it? Plus, there's another question. You uttered the word game, and I just remember now, and I already forgot in what context, but I immediately remember that there's now a whole culture of virtual games. They are primarily military games, and a generation of children who already appeared, who live and they enjoy this eternal sense of war. And by the way, there's no end to this age at the same level. And we found them ourselves in a new reality when you say that war is bad, but war is a component of our life through games, through artifacts, and so on. And in this sense, after about the artistic intelligentsia, so to speak, do we have answers to these questions, or it's only discontent that we have? You know, I understand. It's a difficult, question. Absolutely. You started with a family, right? And I think that this is a problem in all countries that we face, in those countries that are currently fighting, and for those who have never seen a war at all. I think this is a product of globalization. I am already starting to doubt that globalization is a good thing, because you obviously cannot apply the same approach. It's not the same science that fits all. Who is a good mother? A mother is a good one who has time and who communicates with the child at all time, depending on what values and mothers she gives to her offspring. If there's no time, and the present time, we know that of course all parents are busy and they simply cannot afford to communicate all the time, and not even only, sometimes it's not only about what they can, but what they want to do, because there are other some interests and focuses that they have. But as for the artist, I think that among my friends and those artists that I communicate with, and they are my friends, or we either work together, and they're all like, in a way, like, should I say, traditional people. They certainly probably cannot afford to prohibit children, say, some kind of games, but they do not certainly help that. But this global problem is not only ours. The fact that such symbols of military action type and appear, and we still have it. I'm sure we also in Baku we have this hammer and sickle, and some sculptures also remained in, not only sculptures. When I speak about Veri Mukhina, I'm talking about the quality of her work, about the fact, not about the fact that she's a Soviet artist. You understand, right? We need to be looking at the product. If the product is of high quality, I'm as a gallery owner, curator, or dealer, I'm interested in quality work, and that is a point. What is the point of looking at the case and, so to speak, and if you have a buyer or a gallery owner, or simply, I don't know, visiting the museum, who is this person, who or where he is coming from? In no case you can put it like next to each other. There's different things. Absolutely. Beyond any doubt, artistic value is one thing. This was Soviet, right? Symbols are the kitsch, right? I hope that over time all of this will go over to some kind of consumer place. I don't know. I mean, a great function cannot be attached to this. The main thing is to work with children and artists so that everything will be okay with their brain, with their heart, and of course with their pockets. Yes. Could you say that the artists are, in a sense, children? Well, they think like that. We cannot say that. If we are mothers to them, then they will play the role of a children. Of children, yes, mother and the curate. Yeah, the ideal case will be that when it's actually on the equal terms of communication. This, dealing and communication when it is based on the equal terms as colleagues, we speak the same language, we understand each other, we hear and feel each other. This is a partnership, this is cooperation. And in this case, the product can be not be, let's say, the high class, but it is a better quality because artists do not want to think more, they want to just buzz and enjoy anymore. Yes, thank you. In this sense, yeah, I think you provided a great description and build a great context, so to speak, and to pass the floor to Sabina. We talked about partnership, and I remember from my individual work, I often assemble a team for some common projects and so on. And in this sense, it doesn't matter what topic it is, and even more so large and so sophisticated topics such as war and peace and so on. Find a consensus between, we know, the artists. It's difficult, it's challenging because they are different in this sense. It is your job when you unite those people under a common project and your actual participation as an artist, how generally it happened, in what where, in which cases you have an agreement and where you didn't. That there is, when there is war, there's a lack of agreement, or the mini war is a lack of agreement in a simple conversation, which of course doesn't go to the level of a hot war and so on. In this sense, what would you say as models of interaction between small groups and a larger society? I think that, first of all, the key mechanism to unite creative people or groups or some kind of other type of temporary community and some kind of idea, it's obviously some kind of accepted by all manifest, or say a task or the concept that the curator proposes to jointly develop. I would like to cite as an example that there are completely, let's say, different people, and since another curator with whom we made this project, and we can, I think, probably talk about that totally strangers, complete strangers from different countries came to Azerbaijan and united, joined their efforts to give the strength and energy to reflect, maybe according to the first, and even so, for sure, it can be precisely to reveal their life, and they have a certain to go into this certain comfort and beyond their comfort to such a terrible and emotional psychological place like the Nargin Island, which, as I said, was historically effective. Yes, it was one military camp and many prisons and a place for death and execution of very many prisoners of war. This island hosted all of these events and developments. And when artists are very famous artists are in demand, when they came to Azerbaijan, and let me say this, we can talk about it now honestly, and we were forbidden. We were banned at the beginning. When the artists were invited, the ministry that supported us said that we could do the project there, kind of site-specific art on this island. But when they came, it's just not possible because of a number of reasons. And the artists were offered sculptors, installations, and artists who make performances of a contemporary artist of various directions of contemporary art. They were offered that, Azerbaijan is an interesting place. We have Baku, the surroundings are very interesting. There's a Kobustan, there are mud volcanoes, there are ancient rocks, sea dunes, sands, villages, settlements, and so on. There are many interesting things here, and there's an interesting and amazing culture. Nobody wanted that. They said, no, we studied the history, we came here with a definite aspiration to find ourselves in a space that with all its appearance, preserve this history in its original condition. That is not a historical museum per se. It's not something that has been restored. That is the story as it is, or as it was, and as it has remained for more than 100 years. And their reflection was very interesting because, well, unfortunately, it is obvious that this was not shown in any way. The project was never displayed, but fortunately, it was at least some documents that we had. So it united this desire, this aspiration with some kind of inner world, with its inner message to be conveyed, with its understanding of attitude to war and peace, to speak out. So every artist wanted to speak out. And when we, as curators, we saw the result, it was very, very strong message, because all the statements were about love, about peace. They were about the continuation of life. We will tell more, obviously, at the presentation of the project itself. So I think that there is something that unites people. The idea of curator doesn't unite. He can unite others with his idea. Thank you. Thank you. I think that in order to complete our discussion, I would suggest the last question, which is, well, actually, I think can be addressed to all the participants. In this sense, we always say that war is evil and peace is good. But the fact that the artist is a more subtle being, I mean, who, as they say, doesn't make such unambiguous statements. And we, in this sense, see that, well, there are different positions. There are artists who actually glorify the war and say that a long peace is a kind of is a destruction, is a kind of structure in that sense that doesn't prosper. And I would suggest, well, take that into consideration and now speak about a sense. Does the war have any sense or not? In this sense, Ukrainian, this artistic stratum, how do you see that? Because I believe that there are different opinions, and it's not only about, let's say, representative of the fine arts, but also poets, composers, directors. And I think that I have repeatedly heard that there are just wars, fair wars, although many people say that sometimes it can be just, but by means it is not. What can you say about that? I would say that in Ukraine, the representatives of this creative community, where we include artists, researchers, cultural managers, including, of course, probably the majority agree that the war is bad. But there's one but here, that the events in Ukraine in recent years, since 2013, when the revolution happened, and when we had a fugitive president, when we had events on the Maidan, on this occasion when many people died, the new elections, annexation of the Crimea, occupation of part of the Ukrainian lands, all of these events indeed prompted a lot, I would say, a lot of positive transformations in this social cultural domain which I am talking about. Well, for example, with the policy of the new president, the previous one before the incumbent, in Ukraine in particular, the policy of decommunization and decentralization policy started to work. And I would now even more highlight the direction of decentralization, when at last they began to pay much more attention to the regions and not just to what is happening in Kiev, in the capital of the country. Because it used to be when, back in the Soviet times, everyone wanted to go to Moscow. Now, in the days of independence in Ukraine, of course, everyone strives to Kiev, right? Because the most, it's a central city, is well developed economically, politically, the cultural capital, many institutions, all of the creative minds are there. But thanks to the policy of decentralization, there was such a turn and focus on the regions. When first the local communities became more active and realized that they were not a province, they are not a province, and we ourselves, because I also represent regions, right? Dnipropetrovsk region, the Dnipro city, we are not a province. We are also strong participants and experts in the field of contemporary, let's say, culture, contemporary art. And in addition to that, if, let's say, for example, at the beginning of our work in 2013, we came up with 1,000,001, let's say, way to lure an interesting artist, an interesting curator, an interesting journalist to Dnipro to come and write about our projects. And for the last now few years, we are very rich in the sense that everyone is wants to travel outside of Kiev, and everyone wants to discover some kind of additional new social cultural layers. Everyone is bored in Kiev now, and now we see Dnipro as a very popular place. And for example, when we hold residences for artists, and we see the Western artists coming to Ukraine, before they have never been to the east in their life, in the east of Ukraine, there's a much more general concept, and still enough in the post-Soviet cities, although the Dnipro is quite actively and dynamically developed. And now, all the same time, we see a very bright in industrial or post-industrial city. And if there are small cities, and they are certainly very gray and sad to an extent. But when we began to work actively with artists and with residents and cities, and we invite guests from other cities from Kiev to our city, including people who came here. I mean, they looked at our landscapes and they found them very exotic, and including, they were helping to make some of new interesting projects in other media and work with other topics in particular. In addition, there was a huge interest in principle to the eastern region, in the region where military operations are currently undertaken, to the region where the territory is now occupied, because the artists and in general, the creative community, everyone is interested to work with the meanings and get to the bottom of the truth. Why did it happen? Why the people who inhabit the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and even Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk region, there's a more of an eastern cities, why people think in this way and act in such way that war has arrived, has come to them. The war had come to their territories. And so these cultural projects are very closely related to social topics. And this is all the research about the mentality and also research about the past. All researches about the heritage of the Soviet culture, and it was also mentioned earlier, Ketavan mentioned that we are not necessarily always ready to say that all the Soviet heritage is a bad heritage. In Ukraine, in this context of the policy of the decommunization, when a number of monuments and different symbols of the Soviet legacy were destroyed, but there, just like you also got many very valuable and important for Ukrainian culture, many important objects, monumental mosaics, the different sculptures and monuments, just because they were created back in the Soviet times. But it is just a very, and I think, amazing and a bizarre, I believe, approach to that, because these works were created by distinguished luminaries, very interesting and productive Ukrainian artists just in the Soviet times. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are a priori the propaganda heralds and with all of this not very nice flavor of the Soviet Union. In that sense, all of these events and developments that were held in Ukraine, they triggered a creative environment, rather to go into the past and look at that and dig more there, to build some bridges between what was and what is now, and why we are in a way like this now, to deal with education, informal education in the field of culture, to try to search for yourself, to look for your identity. And when we speak about artists, when we were speaking about that there's a left wing, let's say, and right wing, and there are liberal and other artists, in place everyone, I think, probably with their set of tools and in their media and topics, they need to look and research, including, of course, the question why we find ourselves in this situation. And to me, I think it feels like in this context, the war factor, the factor of a revolution, even though it is obviously sad and tragic for one particular individual, and regardless all of this, in this situation for Ukraine, it is an important trigger in the positive and social cultural change in the country. Thank you, Irina. I would like to pass the floor to Ketavan and find out what you have to say about the meaning and about the sense of the war. We heard that it's not only the people who fight, but also the monuments, the art, the pieces of art also wage a war. What is the Georgian? What is Georgian? Yes, part. I mean, we fight, but nothing works, and like it's the same like in your situation. Well, I think that after the Soviet Union, there is no such a definition. Whether it is an, let's say, it's a piece of art. It's not. We are not talking only about the monument or sculpture. I think we are just, adhere to the maximal ideology, and the people who come to power, they, according to their parameters and criteria, choose what they have to destroy and what they have to keep. Ketavan, I'm sorry, I'm just to cut you short on this. You say like the people who came to power. Every person in power has friends, and the people who are consultants, if you like, people who advise him from the world of art, right? I mean, they are not in the vacuum; they are being whispered. This have to be done. So I think we are not fair to those managers and to the officials. I haven't heard about rumors. No, I haven't heard about this rumors. Well, I think in that sense, the artists and the producers are not just, let's say, the audience that haven't done anything. They also have their interpretation because of what they say and consult the power holders, so up in the helm. When we talk about theater, I absolutely agree with you. But in some situation, most of the artists, they are just shut down in their workshops and they work, and this is, I think, their protest. But obviously, everyone is offended as a person. I mean, not offended probably; they're just going mental when some banal campaigns are held, and this, I think, the regular human reaction to that. We are not being listened to. I think this is a case, and Irina was speaking about that earlier. Not like literally, but figuratively. I think she was drawing a parallel between those artists in Kiev, the regional artists, and so on. I think that, the dealing with regions, these materials, resources, the artistic. I mean, you are interested in the regional material only if somebody wants to make money out of it, and just to come and, let's say, tell the person some compliments or help. Well, I have not seen cases like this for a long time, and what that we have this movement in the regions, of course, I applaud that, and that means that there might be some major and very serious cultural values. Remember, Italy is not only Rome or Milan or Florence. Every region, well, before, I mean, it happened before, when during the Renaissance, but this tradition, I believe, is continuous now. And I think it's the same thing here. I mean, like, everyone is gathering in Tbilisi, specifically artists, specifically musicians and artists. They think that it's easier to get things going here and to promote yourself. But I think the problem is that the modern culture, the modern art, is not a priority for the government because, well, and they don't want to invest in that for the development and so on. And I think we need to look at this. We need to push and we need to apply some more efforts, specifically in education. I think we need to start with education. We started, to speak about the war, right? What is a problem? What is a problem? Is it a good or is it a bad? You ask this question, right? You ask this question, Irina, whether it is right or wrong. I think any violence, it's just, the worst things that could happen, the violence, of course. So if the cultures, if the well, the war cannot be justified. If it is a self-defense, I could probably say yes. But I think, anyways, the major thing is that the people have lost the culture of war, the cultured war. I think that's the issue. I think that, well, obviously we will not be able to cover everything during one evening. Probably we need to get together one more time to discuss it, because the topic is in fact very wide and ample. I would suggest to pass the floor to Sabina to conclude this evening with her understanding and recognition of what is going on. And as Lenin, was showing his finger and show the direction where we need to go to. Please, Sabina. Please, Sabina, where should we go? Show us the way. I would probably wouldn't like to be compared to Lenin, of course, in none of the contexts. Of course, God forbids. Yes, of course. I'm just kidding around. Of course, in none of the contexts. Well, to conclude, I would like to thank you for your participation and engagement. Thank you for, of course, admitting me into your company during this very nice discussion. We talked about war and peace and culture and art. And I don't think that, well, I'm not sure that none of these topics could be, a matter of certain, how should I say, conclusion. Yes, absolutely. And therefore, I would like to go back to the point that art has an amazing power of reflection through definite images, symbols, through different medium and forms, completely and utterly short, succinct, and also messages that touch your soul. And I think this is the power and the strength of art, and therefore I probably agreed and became interested in becoming a coordinator of this project. And peace be upon you, salam alaikum, and coming you with peace. And to me, and of course I agree that the war is a horrible development, but at the same time, if you protect your lands, if you defend your close ones, you defend your motherland, then you need to fight. Then, well, I would like to go back to this postulate that we discussed, this message that we convey: peace be upon you, I come with peace. And this is a boomerang effect. If you come with peace, and if you are bringing as a herald the person who is coming and saying salam alaikum and bringing peace upon your house, peace upon you, be upon you. And I think as an answer, as a response to that, every human being should receive the same message likewise. And therefore, I do believe in this future. That is the, obviously, confidence in love, yes, and the message in love. Yes. Thank you, Sabina. Thank you. I wish everyone peace and love. Yes, thank you. See you soon. And see you soon in the next great discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.